that I think,
So,
Hey, Ed, let's interrupt you really quickly, and you can continue.
A couple of news organizations confirming it, including the AP. Breaking news: Kamala Harris picks Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as running mate as she looks to boost the Democratic ticket in the Midwest.
For our viewers,
I was going to say, to Ed's point, he sounds like, a football coach talking about very progressive issues. He brings to the table a background that is very down to earth and connected with people and their daily lives as a former teacher.
It's an interesting pick. I think ironically enough, people have looked at him as the safe pick. I would disagree. This opens up a number of issues for the Democratic ticket to now defend. But this is, it looks like, according to the Associated Press, and we're still waiting at NBC News to confirm it, but the Associated Press and other news organizations, Ed, have in fact said it's Walz. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a good pick, to be honest. I mean, I think Shapiro would have been as well, but he talks in a way that isn't perceived by Republicans or non-Democrats in general to be looking down on them. He talks in a very engaging, everyday manner, a very practical, very common sense. He's a hunter. He shoots. He's got a pretty normal family. He's from a blue-collar background. He's served in the military. I think it's very difficult to paint him as Kamala's equivalent of J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance was, as Governor Walz put it, a weird choice who talks in weird ways. Walz is the unweird. So I think it's going to be pretty hard. And I would echo what Jonathan said earlier. The first principle of selecting a running mate is to do no harm. I don't think he's going to do any harm. I don't think this is going to be a 10-day story. Why did Harris pick Walz? I think it's going to be a 3-day story, and it's going to be a united Democratic Party, and he'll be a popular choice. He communicates in a very effective, very unfake way.
Yeah, and to add to Ed's point, as we bring in Claire McCaskill to this conversation, nobody better than Claire, Tim Walz also brings maturity to the ticket without being too old, which I guess people talk about a lot these days, especially on the Trump side, looking as old as he has lately. At the same time, this is a younger ticket with enough wisdom and maturity to bring to the table their ideas and their vision for the country. Claire, your thoughts on Tim Walz?
I think it's a great pick. Listen, he grounds her in a way that really matters, especially for all of the country that is not on the coast. This is not a coastal elite guy. This is not an Ivy Leaguer. This is a guy who says things like, you'd lose your hair too if you supervise a high school lunchroom for 20 years. This is a guy who can give you advice on how to fix your car. This is a guy who has served 25 years in the National Guard and who has served his country admirably. He has been in Congress. He knows the levers of power in government and how to wield them. He's been a governor in a state that, while, yes, Minnesota is blue, but it's not bright blue. I remember a time when Republicans were getting elected statewide in Minnesota. And he does have this way of communicating. I think what really made the difference here is he's joyful when he's on the attack. He almost, does it with a wink and a smile and a sense of humor when he is going after these guys. And that's what Kamala Harris needs. She needs somebody who will keep the lightness in her campaign, who will be a happy warrior. And that is Tim Walz. He is one happy warrior. I think he's a terrific pick.
Yeah, and also adding to that, joyful in his approach, I think you're absolutely right, Claire. He seems to almost have a twinkle in his eye when he's going after people. And let's just put to the table here that we're hearing this from multiple news sources. Apparently the phone call hasn't been made. The actual conversation hasn't been had yet, but this is the choice. Yeah. But it was down to two amazing choices. Yeah. And ultimately, some of these decisions have to be made in terms of who you feel most comfortable with, who you think you can work with, who you think will be the best fit on your team. That's stuff that, can only be made by the candidate herself.
Exactly. Candidate has to make the decision herself. And I will tell you, the candidate that I'm most comfortable with is a candidate that helps me win Pennsylvania in 2024. So let us hope, Jonathan Lemire, that those outside of Pittsburgh loves Tim Walz. So talk about Walz.
Yeah,
let's talk about how the decision not made, the road not taken. Josh Shapiro, a guy that has approval ratings in the 60s in Pennsylvania. The must-win state for both campaigns, and also the one who was considered the front runner for a very long time. But then there was a backlash, and we heard backlash. There was a very public campaign against Josh Shapiro, and a really ugly whisper campaign against Josh Shapiro, and it's unfortunately that's something that is now hanging over this choice.
No question there, Joe. Josh Shapiro was considered the governor of Pennsylvania, the heavy favorite going into this process. As we mentioned earlier in the show, he was seen as someone who would run for president had President Biden opted to drop out sooner than he did. And he was perceived to be Vice President Harris's top choice and would have, many people believe, delivered Pennsylvania. But clearly the Harris campaign felt if indeed Tim Walz is the pick. And we should note, we're reporting here that the governor of Minnesota has not yet officially been notified that he is the choice. But there are people around Governor Shapiro who have been told that he is not the choice. So we can sort of put two and two together there as to where this is going at this moment. But there are indeed, this is going to be there will be some second guessing about this choice because of the electoral prize that Pennsylvania is. We're already seeing from Republicans some attack lines about Governor Walz, most importantly invoking the 2020 riots there, the Black Lives Matter riots after the George Floyd death. We're seeing that. We're seeing that people have already, Governor DeSantis of Florida has already deemed Harris Walz the most liberal ticket in history. But I think there are selling points to this pick as well. He's a former school teacher. He's the National Guardsman. He was in the House. He was governor. He has a very impressive resume. He is the guy who coined weird. That phrase, which Democrats have used so effectively against Trump and Vance and Republicans, that has taken off in the last 10 days or so, is from the mouth of Governor Walz on our air, calling them weird. So she is an effective communicator. He's a talented politician, no doubt. And they think that will help them in some rural areas, cut down margins of defeat. But we know, because we had Steve Kornacki on yesterday, that wasn't really the case in Minnesota itself. Walz has a libertarian streak. He is someone who I think will be good on the stump as an attack dog in a kindly manner. But there are going to be some who believe that Josh Shapiro should have been the pick.
Yeah, today marks Kamala Harris's first big decision, which she would carry 4 years into the presidency, and it went really well. The decision looks good on substance, and the speech was a home run. There are times where you just need a whiskey. We've all had those times covering these news cycles. But there are other times where you... But there are other times...
Go on. Go ahead.
Long pause. Sneaking a drink. But there are other times where the best thing for you is some Gatorade and a good long run. And I think the party has had these debates and these moments and these freakouts and then the stabilizing. But Harris is leading to now handing off as a running mate, someone who we just saw gave that speech. This is America's dad, America's football coach, America's...
She called him Coach Walz.
Yeah, Coach, America's teacher. Yeah. And the teacher that's cool enough without trying to be cool. But then when people are, and I was reading about this today and it came up on the stage, when people are singling out other classmates because of their identity or who they are, this is the person who comes in and leads. That's actually really cool in a deeper way. And you get this impression from him. There'll be time to assess all this and have debates and have, the investigative journalism. But this is someone who accorded himself tremendously well. And that Gatorade and that run and that kind of healthy, uplifting vibe, boy, does the party need it. But also, as they made the argument, so does America need it. And then his record, liberal without being strident, strong without being overly bombastic. Kind in the traditional sense of the word. And this is, I don't really do dog whistles, so I swear this is not a dog whistle. But you got a reminder of why this isn't just a purely coastal, big state, blue state ticket. Yes, he's from a blue state, but we already talked about the district he's from and the way he represents, which had a heartland thing going on. And heartland isn't necessarily left or right, doesn't need to be. So you were reminded why, again, Kamala Harris's first big decision, she's saying to the nation, whatever you heard about me, I know how to get things done. I know how to lead. I'm bringing on someone from another part of the country, from another set of backgrounds. That doesn't mean compromising on your core beliefs either.
Yeah. I also think that you learn politics in the rooms you're in. When comedians talk about the room, right? Like, you're given jokes and the people are in that room and you do it over and over and you find out what hits and what doesn't. We've seen Donald Trump do that with his crowd. Like that is a collaboration between Donald Trump and the MAGA faithful.
That's how he learns what his policies are.
That's how he learns what they are. And this is a guy whose room has been working as a teacher in a rural school district, and then in a conservative rural congressional district, and then in the state of Minnesota at a statewide level. And again, a state that is a blue state, but can be a battleground state. Donald Trump came very close to yoinking it away in 2016. And I just feel like what you get from him, and I think Josh Shapiro does as well, and I think the foundational text of this approach is Barack Obama's 2004 convention speech, is just like patriotic pluralism. Like a vision of an inclusive society, of the American civic creed, where we stand up to bullies and we look out for people and we're all bound together and we mind our own damn business. And that's a way of talking about a certain set of what to me are genuine liberal and progressive policies in an open-hearted and inviting way that is not wrapped up in, hard to understand jargon.
Yeah.
And I think he just does it real damn well. And they saw that on display.
Nicole?
So in 2008, working for the McCain campaign, you watch the Obama campaign, and there's just something cellular about momentum and winningness.
Yes.
And they have this cellular winningness going on. And you brought up the whiskey, and I think that we were all together 5.5 weeks ago covering the debate. And there was a moment, you were the first to come on the air and talk about what we actually saw, and we were unflinching, and it was brutal. I think we should be as unsparing with what we're seeing here. It is the vibe of winning. It is momentum, pure and simple. Vice President Kamala Harris isn't flawless. I don't think she would say she's flawless. She is running a flawless campaign. Yeah. She has not made one single mistake. And I think Democrats like to say, but she will. She might not.
I mean, it's a sprint now.
Republicans have nominated Trump 3 times. I mean, she is running a flawless campaign. And this choice, even 8 hours ago, I think wasn't as obvious as it is now. He made a couch joke, for Pete's sake. Yeah. I mean, yes to all the cultural sort of universality of his appeal, but he also is unafraid. They are unapologetic in their sort of policies and morals and the things that they fight for, but they're totally approachable. You get the feeling that he's got plenty of neighbors that wear MAGA hats, and he picks up their paper and brings it to their front door, and they're his friends. Yeah. And I think there's been a thirst and a hunger for that. And I think that she, had another. Your winning also is about stringing together one good news cycle after one good news cycle after one good news cycle, and she has done that every single day, including today.
Absolutely. The line that I wrote down from Mr. Governor Coach Walz, I guess we're going to have to now call him. Thank you for bringing back the joy.
Yeah, that was his opening line.
Right? And I think that's part of what it is. I've gotten so many text messages from people who have been locked in this just cycle of terror and fear about what's to come, right? This fear of fascism that's legitimate, because Donald Trump really does want to bring back fascism.
Well, you said you wouldn't talk about our private discussions on TV.
Could you pass the whiskey? Maybe they were for myself. Maybe I have to say
that is private, Joy. Jesus. I'm sorry.
I can't with you. I can't.
I'm sorry.
But I mean, the reality is, I think a lot of people have forgotten how fun campaigns can be. I mean, I actually enjoyed working on campaigns back in the day because there was something about it that was sort of the civic mindedness of it, the kind of camaraderie of it. And there's a certain aspect of it that's fun, even though the stakes are big. And I think that with Donald Trump, he's got this kind of stale act that isn't new. It isn't fresh. He's doing the same shtick that he did in 2016 and 2020. And it's a bit boring, but it's wrapped up in the things he wants to do to us. They want to drag us back to the 1950s. They want women to all get married and have babies, and they want to have 10-year-olds have kids. He wants 10-year-olds to have lunch. You know, it's just a simple Midwestern values thing that Barack Obama did in his campaign. You can say that he's this sort of exotic figure, thing as Barack Hussein Obama. Trump is, again, using his whole middle name. But you know what he is? He's like a normal guy that you would play basketball with. And so is this guy. And I think that is a powerful thing that people forget, that it works. And it worked for Joe Biden. It's one of the ways that Biden defeated Trump is he said, I'm just going to bring back normal. I'm not going to do all these wild things. I don't, poo in a gold toilet like this guy. This guy's like a weird guy. He's odd. J.D. Vance is even weirder. And this is like comfortable, normal, and joyful. That is a powerful thing in campaigns.
I will say, that if you look at for Americans discovering that there's a person named Tim Walz today, which is a huge proportion.
Just to be clear.
Yes. And a huge proportion even of Democrats, right? But they're learning that this is a guy who is a straight white guy from the Midwest who talks like he's from Minnesota because he's from Minnesota. He grew up on a farm. His dad was in the Army. He did 24 years in the Army National Guard. He was a command sergeant major, which is a big freaking deal. He was a high school social studies teacher. His wife was the English teacher. He was the football coach. He ran in a conservative district, was seen as a centrist, had an A rating from the NRA, and was the champion congressional sharpshooter. And when Parkland happened, when the Parkland shooting happened, and his daughter was 17 years old, and he is a lifelong gun owner and hunter, and he's A-rated from the NRA, he decides that he needs to evolve on that issue. And he, as most gun owners do, decides that he's going to support background checks, he's going to support red flag laws and other common sense gun safety laws. And what does he do when he was running for governor that year, when all that is happening? He makes that change. And then he turns around and he donates to charity every dollar the NRA had ever donated to him over the course of his career when he was an A-rated NRA Democratic moderate from a rural red-leaning district.
And he gets an F. And
now he has an F, and he wears it as a badge of honor.
I think that's part of what the Harris campaign is sort of saying. What she's saying with this is America, and it's inviting. We talked about the Zoom calls, which can be different constituency groups, but the white guy Zoom call, it's half a joke.
That's white dudes.
White dudes, thank you. Yes, the dude abides. It's half a joke, but it's also very real in that you're bringing these people together. And so Democrats spent many years on defense on so-called conservative issues, including national security or safety. You just talked about what does gun safety look like, or wearing a darn flag pin. And I'm all for celebrating America any way you choose. But all of the right-wing flag pin theater is very different from what Harris is saying today, which is this is also America, but it has certain values. And he said you can have compromise orientation without compromising your values. And so that's a different sort of invitation. And it's different than it being right-wing performative. And now you have the so-called MAGA folks on defense about, what's the real America they represent?
They're debating who's weirder. Like, if you're debating whether you're weirder or they're weirder, like, you're already losing. He is what J.D. Vance pretends to be. And that's the problem.
The other thing is, I think because the country is not particularly divided on abortion, 76% of Americans thought Roe was properly decided, not divided on gun safety. 85% wants gun safety legislation, including majority gun owners. What all the Republicans have had for the last 10 years is cultural division. He erases it all in 40-minute speech. Go on.
I just think this, watching the Democratic Party work through itself in the last 3 weeks or so, and it's just, again, I keep coming back to this notion of pluralism because it's like a weird dated word that no one uses anymore, but I think it's really beautiful and kind of the central core of this whole thing, which is when you talk about there's different constituencies, there's different, like, democracy is about, like, attaching across all these lines of difference. We're trying to build a multiracial democracy. We've really only been one since the Voting Rights Act. It's super hard to do. They fall apart left and right. And here you've got this moment on stage with, like, she's got these parents who are both immigrants from different traditions. She grows up in Oakland. He's from this totally different part of America and this totally different upbringing. And there they are on stage, like, stitching together this coalition that is the pro-democracy coalition, which is embodied in the Democratic Party, which got all different kinds of lines of difference. It's got to hold together with people that disagree and are coming from different places.
And you know what the
and
word
it
for
felt
that is,
like
though, Chris?
that was it today. Like, there, you see it. Like, this is what it looks like.
The word for that is diversity.
Yeah,
and
exactly
the Republicans are
what it
running
is.
from it, but that's all
That's
it
what it
means.
is.
It just means that everyone's at the table.
We are different types of people who come from different places who share the values that we all ought to have an equal say, and we all ought to try to do the best for our families.
Speaker, thank you very much for being on this morning. Wartime. So we'd love to hear your first reaction to the choice of Tim Walz as Kamala Harris's running mate.
Good morning. Wonderful to be with you all. Tim Walz is wonderful. And she had many good choices among the 6 and certainly among the 2. I'm a big fan of Governor Shapiro. Tim Walz, I know very well. He served in the House. To characterize him as left is so unreal. It's just not what the question. He's right down the middle. He's a Heartland of America Democrat. And he was the chair of our Veterans Affairs Committee. And I don't want anybody to forget that, because he made tremendous, tremendous gains for our veterans. Working with our folks on the Appropriations Committee and with the Speaker, we made more progress than had ever been made in the history of our country since the GI Bill under his leadership. 25 years in the National Guard, longest serving non-commissioned officer ever served in the Congress of the United States. So he brings the security credential, he brings the rural credential, and he will do well in rural America. And I heard Joe say, well, Biden did better. Well, Biden was running against Donald Trump. Joe Biden, Tim Walz was running against somebody who had more credentials in rural America, but he still won. He still won. So I really, it's mystifying to me to see someone that I worked with, shall we say, right down the middle, characterized on the left in this regard. He has her confidence, obviously. That was the decision that the president, our presidential nominee, soon to be president of the United States, has made. I respect the decision, and I respect all the rest. Look at the bench. Josh Shapiro, fabulous. Buttigieg, Beshears, Pritzker, the list goes on of so many great leaders in the Democratic Party across the country. Mark Kelly as well. So they were all great. She had wonderful choices to make. And I want to say Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan as well, even though she took herself out of the running early on. He has a great vision for our country. It's about working class families, about rural America, about our veterans. He has won for governor 2 times in Minnesota. Reverend Sharpton talked about his decision in terms of the George Floyd, such a sad situation. And obviously, we respect the judgment of our nominee for president, and her comfort level is our comfort level.
Madam Speaker, this, of course, is now the beginning of the campaign. There's a Democratic nominee for president, and there will be a Democratic nominee for vice president running against the former incumbent, Donald Trump. But your view on American politics, did it change early in the morning of October 28th, 2022, when you were awakened quite early in the morning here in the East Coast by your security detail telling you that your husband had been attacked and beaten in your own home? An element of politics, actually.
Well, that was a terrible threshold to cross, that someone would enter our home and violently, well, looking for me. So I have my level of guilt in terms of all of this because he was looking for me, found my, where's Nancy, echoing January 6th, where's Nancy, when they're going through the Capitol, and then to assault my husband in that way. It's not, and it's personal with us, with our family, that they made jokes of it after it was even more traumatizing for our children and for our grandchildren. But it really speaks very clearly to the fact that we can't have that kind of politics in our country. Politics is a peaceful way of resolving.
But it's already vicious already at the inception of the campaign.
Well, I will tell you, my situation didn't happen that day. It happened years of the Republicans demonizing me, and some of them on this network demonizing me, and so it created an atmosphere where that would be acceptable. So we can't have that. We have to take that out of the picture. We have to take that out of the picture. I was so saddened when the assault on the president. That has no place. Thank God it did not harm him greatly, and he survived. But we can't have that in our politics. That was strange. We don't know the motivation. We don't know the person. What happened in our house was directly related to the politics of the day.
Speaker Pelosi, isn't that one of the things you hope to bring out in this book, The Art of Power, that we need to return to a sense of how we get legislation through how we change policy, how we deal. We can disagree without being disagreeable. And I think that's one of the reasons it may be providential. As a minister, I'll say providential. You hear when Walz is chosen to run with Vice President Harris, because really this election will be about going back to the art of politics rather than using physical force and threats and all kind of comedic as well as dangerous rhetoric.
Well, you see, I mean, here we are in a journalistic forum that this person who had been president would say as president to a crowd, if you beat up the press, I'll pay your legal fees. That's not appropriate in any way, but you didn't see too much blowback from other responsible Republicans on that. But to your point, Reverend Sharpton, thank you for making it, we have to return to that. I've been in the Congress a long time. We had our differences of opinion. That's the Democratic way. What's the role of government, the role of the federal government versus local, and we represent our job title and our job description are one and the same, representative. We represent our districts, and so we have differences of opinion, whether it's regional, generational, ethnic. In many ways, we have differences of opinion, political philosophy as well. So we have to return to a time when I first came to Congress, it was like a kaleidoscope. One day, the Democrats over there would be against the Republicans over here. The next day, it would be Democrats and Republicans and one part of the coalition against Democrats and Republicans. So everybody was a strength to you at some point, and you didn't want to weaken any resource, and you always wanted to respect the people who sent them there. I believe in the goodness of the American people. I think they want us to return to a place where we come, we negotiate, we collaborate. We do so with transparency, with accountability, and with bipartisanship.
I got to tell you, pointing out just an observation of mine that I made. I just have to say it. You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy, and yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see. That's what you see.
Governor Tim Walz is the guy who started the whole weird term for how everyone is now describing the Republican ticket. And this all happened well before it became the vice presidential pick today. Walz, the governor of Minnesota, figured out a way to go at Donald Trump and J.D. Vance in a way that really did get under their skin. I mean, they have been whining about it a lot. And so today, when Kamala Harris picked Tim Walz as her running mate, it was kind of weird when Republicans were celebrating, suggesting this is a matchup they actually wanted.
Tim Walz's record is a joke. He's been one of the most far-left radicals in the entire United States government at any level. So I think what it says is that Kamala Harris is running as a San Francisco liberal. She is governed as a San Francisco liberal, and she's chosen a running mate who will be a San Francisco-style liberal.
I mean, I guess a Mankato-style liberal is kind of what he is, but it's a weird charge to level against Walz, former social studies teacher, football coach, who actually just visited San Francisco for the first time in his life last month. Well, wait a second. Oh, right. J.D. Vance lived in San Francisco for years and years, making big tech money and Silicon Valley connections that bankrolled his political future. Like, he's the guy that actually, lived in San Francisco, raised his family there. But Republicans want you to think Walz, the guy who is a public school teacher in rural Minnesota, the unassuming guy who stuck them with the weird label, is the radical leftist. The Trump campaign points to an old interview clip as proof that actually he's a secret Chinese communist.
I lived in China, and as I said, I've been there about 30 times, but if someone tells you they're an expert on China, they're probably not telling you the truth, because it's a complex country. But it's critically important for us. I don't fall into the category that China necessarily needs to be an adversarial relationship.
That does not seem that unreasonable as a statement. By the way, do you remember how Donald Trump said he and Chinese President Xi Jinping love each other, direct quote, and expressed envy that Xi got to be president for life? Trump campaign also hitting Walz for dismissing their culture war obsessions. Tim Walz thinks it's insane people will be upset at Target for partnering with a satanic designer to promote transgender products for kids. They announced on social media. Here's the video they included as proof.
You know, a governor next door to me this week made the case that a rainbow on a T-shirt at Target is destroying our democracy. That's nonsense. That's just insane. And I think most people here in Minnesota agree.
Who do you think comes out of that sounding more radical to you, at least? Some Republicans are talking about swift boating Walz because he left the National Guard back in 2005 rather than stay and deploy to Iraq, though I'm not sure. Trashing an honorably discharged 24-year Army veteran. The highest-ranking enlisted man ever to serve in the United States Congress, if I'm not mistaken, who later worked on the House Veteran Affairs Committee. I don't think that really helps Donald Trump, whose own former staffers say he called American war veterans suckers and losers. Republicans are going to find out, I think, that framing a gun-owning Midwest nice guy as a radical far-left commie ends up painting you into some really weird corners. Some conservatives now, in order to sort of keep this whole shtick going, now claiming Minnesota just isn't real America. No, literally. The secretary of the Ohio Republican Party said Minnesota isn't even in the Midwest. It's basically Canada, which last I checked, we have 50 states. National Review writer who said Minnesota is Canada light, might as well be a different planet. Remember how Republicans said the theme of their convention last month was unifying Americans? Now they're reduced to arguing the most genuine regular guy on a major American Party ticket, the highest-ranking enlisted soldier ever to serve in Congress, whose biggest political achievement is making sure no kids go hungry in schools, is actually a gender-hating, valor-stealing, civilization-destroying anarchist who kind of looks like Chris Farley. Doing it, they're sounding even more racist and transphobic, more unhinged, and frankly, weirder and weirder.
Here's something you might not have known about Tim Walz. He's on a group text with dozens of current and former members of Congress, men and women called Sports Buddies, where they mostly trash talk each other's favorite teams. Those relationships, though, proved valuable. Walz had a lot of cheerleaders in Congress during the VP vetting process. One central argument is that his Hill connections could help Harris implement her legislative agenda. He's especially liked by a number of key progressive lawmakers. Progressive Caucus Chair Pramila Jayapal said the current moment for Democrats is, quote, organizer gold. NBC's Julie Sturkin is reporting from Capitol Hill. Also with us, former Democratic Congressman of New York, Joe Crowley, former chair of the House Democratic Caucus. Good to have both of you. So what are you hearing from progressives on the Hill, Julie?
Well, progressives have worked with Tim Walz for a long time in Congress. He was a member of this body for 12 years, Chris, and he obviously represented a very swingy district in Minnesota. So he was able to work across the aisle, but he was also able to build deep relationships with progressives, and many of them are applauding this pick by Vice President Harris. You mentioned Jayapal. She also posted a cheeky photo of Walz holding a little piglet, saying the only reaction you can have to Trump's deranged, rambling, unhinged rhetoric sometimes. You also heard from Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, a member of the so-called squad here, actually poking fun at the fact that not only did she endorse and back this pick, but also did Senator Joe Manchin, somebody who really never agrees with AOC. She's saying that they are in disconcerting levels of array, meaning agreement throughout the party on this. And it might have something to do with the fact that Walz, while he was a member of Congress, was very moderate. If you look at his voting record, bills that he supported, he really is in the center left of his party. But as governor, enacting and backing many progressive policies and platforms, something that Bernie Sanders championed and talked about on Minnesota Public Radio on Saturday, talking about the free breakfasts and lunches in schools, talking about his record on codifying abortion rights, on health care protections, in Sanders' words, really standing up for the working people and the working class. Bernie Sanders, by the way, Chris, has not formally endorsed Harris for president. He told me before the Senate left for recess that he's going to do everything he can to elect her. Certainly a pick like Walz is going to make him happy, and it is interesting that it is unifying the party in this way. Also, by the way, reaching out to the Muslim and Arab American community, where Michigan, sitting next door, had that big uncommitted vote. This is something that the Democratic leaders are also hoping that Walz can help with.
As you know, Joe, not everybody was for Tim Walz. Everybody had their own ideas, but you served with him. What was your impression of him? What do you think of Tim Walz as the pick, as somebody who worked with him? And is it possible that he could be somebody, if the ticket was elected, that could help on the Hill?
Well, I do think that Vice President Harris had a great selection of people to pick from. And I knew three of them very well. Josh Shapiro, who I've known for almost 30 years, and certainly Mark Kelly, we all have known, and Gabby Giffords. And Tim Walz is someone that I served with for 12 years. He is a wonderful human being. People describe him as a happy warrior. I think that's right. I think that Tim is very smart, very dedicated to his constituency when he was in the House. I worked very closely with him on the Affordable Care Act. You know, he had the Mayo Clinic in his backyard in his district, but wanted that for more Americans to have exposure to some top quality health care. And he voted and supported the Affordable Care Act back then. He's just a wonderful, wonderful man, and I think it's a great pick. A good friend of mine described him as a kitchen table kind of guy, and I think that's really right.
As you know, the attacks have begun on the other side. Nikki Haley, for example, who did endorse Donald Trump, posted this: Democrats doubling down on the progressive movement, a win for open borders, socialism, and Iran. Do you think that this could help the Trump campaign? Does it give them talking points?
Well, I wonder how Nikki Haley's working with that whiplash she has all of a sudden. You know, it's really ironic to hear Nikki Haley criticizing anyone at this point when she bashed Donald Trump throughout her primary and now has suckled up to him again. I do look. No one's perfect. There's going to be issues out there that Tim will deal with, but he'll do it honestly. He's someone who will readily admit that he's made mistakes, running up against a guy like Donald Trump who never admits he makes a mistake. So there'll be a real dichotomy here. The fact that you mentioned earlier, AOC and Joe Manchin are behind this pick, I think speaks volumes to Tim's ability to really relate to other people. And I do think, Chris, you're right. He's going to have that ability to work the House, to work the Senate as vice president, and to help get their agenda across the table.
So we're seeing right now Vice President Harris, who has gotten off Marine 2. She's at Joint Base Andrews, JBA, and she is going to make her way to meet up with Tim Walz, somebody we hear she had great chemistry with, and they're going to have their first in a series of rallies in 7 battleground states over the course of the next 5 days. Pennsylvania, of course, getting a tremendous amount of attention. It's a place that frankly, campaigns can be decided. The campaign likes to say that just in the last 15 days. They've had over 33,000 people signed up to volunteer. They've got almost 300 staffers working in 36 offices. Did we hear if she said something there? Why Tim Walz? She gave the thumbs up and walked away. And there you see her with the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, who has also been very productive even before Joe Biden stepped down on the campaign trail and almost certainly will continue to be a big part of this campaign. Can we just talk about relationships, Joe? And I know you've watched a lot of presidential campaigns, and I've mentioned this a number of times on the show, but when Joe Biden first decided to step down, and Kamala Harris went to what was now her campaign headquarters in Delaware, Doug Emhoff told a story about when she was chosen to be VP and going over to the home of the Bidens and how welcoming they were. There were cookies, and how Joe Biden called his parents. And I don't know if you can put that aside when we hear that a relationship, chemistry, was important to them, to whoever she decided to pick. And what does it mean out on the campaign trail to be with people who you trust, who you like, who, frankly, you can stand to be with 24/7 sometimes, including on a small campaign plane?
Well, I think that's important. Chemistry is always important. I think that certainly something that the vice president had in mind when she met with all these folks. And as I said before, I think she could have had chemistry with any of them, quite frankly. But there's no doubt that Tim Walz is one of the nicest people you will ever meet. He's a decent, honorable, good person. And that comes across in just his personality, the way he acts, the way he speaks. He can cut right through to things, and it can be very effective, can be very biting at times as well. But that's a chemistry that she was looking for, someone that can be that wing person for her, can be there when she maybe couldn't say something. Tim can say something she can't say, and vice versa. So, he speaks to Middle America, speaks to Minnesota, speaks to Michigan, speaks to Pennsylvania, speaks to Wisconsinites. I think that's why I think she chose Tim, because he's not just about Minnesota. He's about the Midwest. It's just an accent. You can hear it in him.